Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Greenlight Guru True Quality Virtual Summit, the three-day event designed to provide actionable takeaways you can implement to your own company to innovate faster, stay ahead of regulatory changes, and use quality as a strategic asset to grow your business. Today's session is titled An Inside Look at the Changes to the new ISO 14971 2019 version from a member of the Standards Working Group. My name is Tom Risch, and I'm a medical device guru here at Greenlight Guru, and I will be your moderator for today's event. We have a very special session today. I know our speaker, Edwin Bills, is really looking forward to sharing his valuable expertise on medical device quality, regulatory, and especially risk management, and those insights into the new version of ISO 14971. Before we dive too deep into today's presentation and introduce our speaker, I'm going to touch on a few items real quick. First, this session is going to be about 45 minutes in total length and will include a Q&A session at the end where Ed has been kind enough to answer your questions. So I encourage you to submit your questions throughout the presentation as they come up in the box on the right-hand side, and we will get to as many of them as time permits. This entire session will be recorded. Once this session wraps up, there will be a 10-minute break before the next live session begins. If you're interested in learning when to flip the switch, balancing late feasibility and early design controls, I encourage you to make sure you register to follow for the following session and use your unique link to tune in. If you aren't already signed up, you can register for the next session and over 20 others at the virtual summit.greenlight.guru. I'd also like to share a few words about Greenlight Guru and why we put on this free virtual summit. If you've been to one of our training sessions before, then you know we put these on because improving the quality of life is our mission here at Greenlight Guru. Likely a similar mission as many of you at today's summit. Anything we can do as an organization that helps device makers bring safer, life-changing devices to market quicker and with less risk aligns with that mission. We're constantly looking for ways to fulfill that mission, whether it's through hosting free events and training sessions, through partnering with world-class medical device consultants like today's presenter, Ed Bills, or through our award-winning medical device QMS software. If you'd like to learn more about why medical device companies from across the globe are moving away from paper-based general-purpose quality systems and adopting our purpose-built medical device quality management system, I encourage you to head on over to www.greenlight.guru after today's presentation to schedule your free personalized one-on-one demo. In doing so, you'll learn how the very best medical device companies are leveraging our purpose-built quality management software to gain ISO 13485 2016 certification, market approval, breeze through audits, and push beyond just compliance to produce true quality medical devices. So if you're interested in learning how we can help your company, make sure you visit www.greenlight.guru after today's webinar and schedule your demo. Now, on to the bulk of today's presentation. Let me give you a proper introduction to your presenter today and a distinguished partner of ours here at Greenlight Guru, Edwin Bills. During his career in medical devices, Mr. Bills has held a number of quality and regulatory affairs positions for major medical device companies, including a period as corporate director of risk management. He has over 36 years of experience in the field of quality and regulatory affairs, including time as director of quality and regulatory concurrently for 4 U.S. sites. Currently, he consults and provides training in the areas of medical device quality, regulatory, and risk management. With Stan Mastrangelo, he co-authored Life Cycle Risk Management for Healthcare Products, from research through disposal, published by PDA. Mr. Bills was also a member of the adjunct faculty serving Virginia Tech's graduate online degree program in Health Products Risk Management. ASQ has awarded Mr. Bills with fellow status as well as Certified Quality Engineer, Certified Quality Auditor, Certified Manager of Quality and Organizational Excellence, and he is a Regulatory Affairs Certified by the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. Additionally, Mr. Bills serves in international standards work, assisted in completing the revision of the third edition of ISO 14971 Risk Management Standard as an international member of the technical committee. He also serves on the U.S. National Committee for Medical Devices, Quality Systems Standard, ISO 1345, and the AMI Technical Committee CP, developing a combination products risk management guidance. So quite the introduction, and without further ado, let me hand it over to your presenter, Edwin Bills. Thanks, Ed, for being here.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate your kind words there, and looking forward to our presentation today. And we've got quite a crowd with us. This presentation that we're giving you today is up to date as of last week. There's a number of things that I will discuss during this presentation that occurred over the last few weeks. And we have a poll here that would be helpful if you all could answer the one question. What type of product are you developing? Is it a medical device, an IVD, or a combination product? And all of these need to be managed through the risk management standard ISO 14971. But we would like to have a view of what kinds of products you all are making, so we can better tailor everything to you. So let's see, Tom, how do we get back to the do it later. There we go. So now here's the agenda. We're going to go through the reasons for the changes in the standard itself, how the documents were reorganized, and we're talking about 14971, the 2007 edition, and 24971, the 2013 edition, and what they look like today after the revisions in 2019 and 2020. We will be talking about some specific changes. We'll talk about the release information, and we'll also discuss the latest information on the EN versions of these two documents, and then some final thoughts. So first, let's look at the reasons. In 2015, the ISO and IEC, national or international organizations for standards, took a poll. They had a systematic review of the standard 14971 and the accompanying guidance document 24971. And that vote was tabulated in 2016 and resulted in some actions that we needed to take. So these are joint documents that are developed by the two organizations, and they're approved by all the national bodies that are members of those two organizations. ISO TR 24971, when it was first released in 2013, is a guidance or technical report in the implementation of 14971, and a lot of people didn't know about it. It was not widely known, nor was it understood what the purpose of that document was. So that was one of the things that came out in the 2016 vote to reaffirm the 2007 standard or recommend changes. So there were 60 comments that came in when they were consolidated. So what they did is all the national committees submitted comments, and then those were put in categories and consolidated into 60 categories, which is much the same way the FDA did the quality system regulation back in '94. So that information was consolidated and sent to the technical committee, ISO TC 210 Joint Working Group number 1, of which I'm a member. We're responsible for the risk management standard. And we met in June of 2016 in Tampa to develop a work plan to update the standard and guidance based upon the 60 categories of comments that we received. And from that point forward, we met 3 times a year in face-to-face and innumerable times using this wonderful technology to have web meetings. So there's a whole lot of work that went into this update that you see before you now. The parent committees charged us as follows. Number 1, maintain the key concepts of and the core approach to risk management. And what that meant was follow the trail that 14971 originally established back in 2000 and revised in 2007. And we ended up ignoring the business risk management or enterprise risk management standard, ISO 31000, as that's a separate process, and we'll see later how that is pointed out. Second thing was to clarify the normative requirements, and there were some topics in particular that they wanted more information on. The first one and the most extensive changes were done to production and post-production information, which was Clause 9 in 2007. That area had been addressed widely with the FDA and the EC with post-market surveillance. So we need to update to line up with some of the regulatory requirements in those areas. Then clinical benefits and risk-benefit analysis was an area that while it was out there, it just wasn't too clear. Then we were supposed to update the guidance in the annexes. And one thing you need to understand that all of the annexes are guidance and not requirements in the standard. 14971 has numbered clauses, and those numbered clauses are requirements. Anything that has an alphabetic character in the standard is not a requirement, but is guidance and helpful information. You don't have to follow that, but it might be helpful. Then the other charge was to update ISO TR 24971, or optionally to merge that with the standard, because we had 2 documents out there and people didn't understand how they related. So now we're going to look at some specific changes. The final approach that we decided on, and that was in consultation with ISO's Technical Management Board, is that the informative annexes would be primarily in ISO 24971, the TRR technical report, because it's easier to update a technical report than a standard. You can do that in 3 years versus 5 years. It also requires less consultation with national committees. And most of the comments that had been received since the first edition in 2000 had been more guidance. There was not much requirements for updating the process. So by going this way and separating out the 2 documents, we could update 24971 more quickly and address requirements or requests for more information more quickly. The Technical Management Board also required us to do something that was kind of, from our point of view, kind of clunky. They required us to insert a Clause 2, and it had to be a Clause 2 in called normative references, even though there are none in the standard. So we have a Clause 2 that says there are no normative references. So what that resulted in is all the clause numbers starting with 2 were incremented by 1, which ended up Clause 2, which was terms and definitions, is now Clause 3, and so on. So the standard would be updated to meet requests of the various comments that we got. So now if we look at the structure, and we'll first look at comments on how 24971 lines up with the new standard. So what we have here is a table. On the left in the blue is what it looked like in 2007. So you had clause 1, which was scope, 2, terms and definitions, and so on, down through clause 9, which was production and post-production. Well, our friends from the Technical Management Board inserted that clause 2, and in red, I've got all the title changes. So clause 2 is a new title, normative references. So then terms and definitions became clause 3. The general requirements, clause 4, became general requirements for risk management. Notice the word system here. We're now establishing requirements for a risk management system. And then 5, 6, and 7, they stayed the same. Clause 8, they struck the word acceptability out of evaluation for overall residual risk. And clause 9, the risk management report was struck and replaced with review, and we'll talk about that a bit later. And then finally, clause 10, which was the old clause 9, we took out the word information and changed it to activities. So there are activities that are required in the production and post-production activity area. Now, that's that middle column there is 14971, 2019. That's the way it's organized as compared to 2007. What you'll notice on the right is ISO 24971, 2020 with the same clauses and titles. And what this is there is guidance, not requirements. All of 24971 is guidance. And so there's further explanations of each of these clauses that appears in 24971. So if you want to know more information about evaluation over overall residual risk, go look at clause 8 in 24971. Okay. So now that's the standard. Let's look at what the guidance looks like now. We're going to look at what the 2013 version looked like, and then what the 2020 looks like. But since we moved things from 14971 2007, we've got to include that on this table as well. So we'll start with the left-hand column shows you what it looked like in 2007. The blue column in the middle is a 2013 version of 24971. And we have to go way down the list before we find out what the items look like there. But the gold columns are the new documents, what they look like. So you'll notice 14971 2019 has Annex A, the rationale for requirements, which is a revised version of Annex A in 2007. Annex B in the 2019 version is a revised version of Annex B in the 2007 edition. And the really great value here is the additional detail comparing 2007 to 2019. And rather than my simplified table here, what you end up with is clause and subclause by subclause all the way through the two versions of a standard. So you can find things pretty easily, but it's a whole lot of detail. Then you'll notice that Annex C and D in 14971 2007 are now in 24971 2020. So Annex C, which were the questions that everybody used in their risk management processes, now appear in 24.971 in Annex A, and that includes the identification of hazards and the characteristics of safety. So it's an updated version of the content that was in Annex C. And remember, this is guidance, this is not requirements, and the questions that are in that section are merely examples and not extensive requirement sets. So those may apply or may not apply to your product, and you may want to do something different, and that's okay, because these are not requirements. So Annex D, which was risk concepts in 14.971, now has been scattered through the appropriate numbered clauses of 24.971. So the risk concepts are moved throughout the 24.971. So now, looks like we have a technical problem here. The next one, which would have been Annex E, which was hazards, foreseeable sequences of events, and hazardous situations, now appears in two places. Fundamental risk concepts in 24.971, which is Annex C, and that Annex C has been updated, and there is a great deal of what was in the annex in 14.971 2007, but not all of it. There's more of it that also appear in the 5.4 and 5.5 of 24.971 2020. So there's a lot of information on identification of hazards and risk estimation there. Annex F, which was the risk management plan, which had an annex all by itself, now is covered in a clause 4.4 on risk management plan in the technical report. Again, this is guidance, okay? Annex G, which was information on risk management techniques, and that's the one that explained FMEA and fault tree and HACCP and HAZOP and all the different risk management techniques, is now in Annex B of 24.971 and is titled Techniques that Support Risk Analysis. It's not on risk management techniques, but rather on risk analysis, because that's where those techniques apply. Annex H was the guidance on IVDs. It remains Annex H in the new document. So those of you that are doing IVDs, it's the same place, but just in the TR instead of in the standard. And we deleted on risk management from the title and just shortened it a little bit. Annex I is guidance on risk analysis process for biological hazards. That was totally removed because the folks that wrote ISO 10993, the biologic hazards standard, in -1 covered that topic exceedingly well, better than we could have. So we just deferred to them for their expertise, and they did a great job on that one. Then Annex J now is now the section on, I've got to make something go away here on my copy. Information for safety and information about residual risk, which was in Annex J, and that was part of the confusion that occurred in the 2012 European version. So the 2013 version of 24.971 tried to address the differentiation between information for safety and residual risk. And finally, that was addressed now in the new 24.971 in the annex there. So Annex D. And the title was modified there as well. Okay, so we'll wrap up then pretty much. in the next two slides what it looks like in the 24971. There was in the 2007 edition was the scope, clause 1, that's scope in the new document. Clause 2, the role of international product safety and process standards in risk management. Boy, is this of great value. It now appears in Annex E of 24971. And this will help you when you use standards in the design of your product to reduce the amount of risk management work you have to do in the risk analysis process. Read that section and follow it. It's really, really helpful. It's going to save you a ton of work. The next thing that appeared in the 2013 edition was developing the policy for determining the criteria for risk acceptability. Nobody really did a good job on this. This was something that's been not well implemented across the industry. Annex C in 24971 addresses relation between the policy criteria for risk acceptability, risk control, and risk evaluation. This is a very important annex. You need to spend some time looking at that because along with Annex E, you can use this to update your risk management process and your policy in this case to conform with the requirements of the standard. And then clause 4 was production and post-production feedback loop, which is now, of course, clause 10 in the new 14971 and appears in the guidance section, clause 10 of 24971 2020. And finally, we added two new informative annex sections. The first one is an annex on risk related to cybersecurity. And that section is very important for software people. How do cybersecurity and risk management play together? And this annex was written by software people, not by the risk management team, but by people from the software committees from ISO, although they were also members of our committee as well because of that collaboration. And then finally, Annex G, which is components and devices designed without using ISO 14971. This one might be helpful for doing remediation. This talks about establishing a quality plan to update your risk management process. This might be an application you could use as you're updating from the 2007/EN 2012 version to the new 2019 version of the standard. So that's where things have gone. So we're going to look more specifically at the types of changes that have occurred. One thing you might note is that there's in the 2007 edition, there were 15 pages of requirements. Now that's slightly less than 17 pages. So there's about a new page and a half, or less than 2 pages anyway, of revised requirements. And they're all around clause 10. So that might give you an idea of the impact of production and post-production, the changes that occurred there. In the 2007 edition, there were 70 pages of informative annexes, and the 24971 2013 version has 16 pages of informative annex. So we had a total of 86 pages going into this revision. Now we've cut in half what's in 14971. There's only 35 pages now of informative annexes there, but there's 100 pages of informative annexes for a total of 135 pages now versus the old 86 pages. So you can see there's a lot more information, 49 new pages of informative annexes in the between the standard and the technical report. So you have a lot of help out there to help you implement the standard. So now changes the scope. I wanted to highlight part of the scope here. It talks about can be applied to products that are not necessarily medical devices in some jurisdictions, can also be used in others involved in the medical device life cycle. Some of that came about by some of the changes that occurred with the MDR. The document does not apply to decisions on the use of the medical device in the context of any particular clinical procedure. So what we're saying there is the docs decide how to use the device. We don't decide from a risk management perspective how they're going to use the device. So we recognize the fact that there is off-label use that takes place. But what you have to do is, when that's known and foreseeable, is address those risks. Now, it does not apply to business risk management. There is a standard for that, ISO 31000. That should be managed in that standard separately from the product safety risks that are managed in 24971. And changes of note, now we're going to look at the definitions. We talked about normative references, so we can skip that. There's new definitions for benefit. Nowhere else is the word benefit defined. In the MDR, it's not defined. It's not defined in the FDA's documents. So here's a definition. Positive impact or desirable outcome of the use of a medical device on the health of an individual, or positive impact on patient management or public health. And that definition will help you as you're doing benefit risk analysis. Reasonably foreseeable misuse. We were hoping that the usability folks would decide on how to address that, but we ended up collaborating with them, and the decision was made that we would define that. So that's use of a product or system in a way not intended by the manufacturer, but which can result from readily predictable human behavior. Again, that's not defined anywhere, but it is a requirement that we address it in risk analysis. State of the art is another definition that doesn't appear elsewhere. And it's the developed stage of technical capability at a given time, regards products, processes, and services based on relevant, consolidated findings of science, technology, and experience. This is not bleeding edge state of the art, but rather this is what is commonly used, and it oftentimes it is what's defined in standards. So standards usually, if they're up to date, define state of the art. Now, the BSI has stated that ISO 14971 2019 is the state of the art standard for risk management. And you'll notice in Europe, EN 14971 2012, SIN has withdrawn that standard. So the 2019 is the correct one to use. And another minor update to definitions was the term, the word physical was removed from harm. We decided that there was more than physical injury that could happen. For instance, if there was a improper or diagnosis based upon an IVD that did not perform properly, you could have an emotional injury, perhaps. So the term physical was removed based on that. It also applied to cybersecurity as well. Okay, Clause 4 introduces the risk management system. We talked about that a bit ago. A risk management system consists of 5 elements: the process, the management responsibilities, the competence of personnel, the risk management plan, and the risk management file. Those five items together are your risk management system, and they must work together as a system. Clause 4.1, Figure 1, has been changed to include the risk management plan, And the titles were changed to align with the new version of the standard. So if you use that drawing, which is commonly done in a lot of people's procedures, you'll need to update that to align with the new standard. Clause 4.5 continues to require traceability for each hazard throughout the process to be documented in the risk management file. Traceability first appeared in the GHTF guidance document on risk management, and I've given you that title there. I also wrote an article, co-wrote an article in Amy Horizons was the name of the publication in 2015 on documenting traceability. And what we ended up with was something that looks like this. Is not an FMEA, but is rather a method of documenting and tying together all of the documents that you're going to have in your risk management system. And this has been used extensively by people to show to the auditors and the regulatory people on how their risk management process works. And it's got a lot of kudos out of it, but it's based upon what appeared in that 2005 GHTF document, which is still available at imdrf.org. So you do identify the document and the line item for each of the hazards, and then as you go across this first page is the risk assessment, which consists of your analysis and your evaluation. And then for things that require updating or risk control, then you will have a section which continues to identify the risk control. It identifies where that product requirement appears and what document and line item, and then how you verify the implementation and the effectiveness, and what the post-control risk is, and any comments which might be a risk-benefit analysis. All this, these last two slides, covers the requirements for traceability that appear and have appeared in 14971 since the 2007 edition. This will work to cover that. In clause 5.4 now, risk analysis has been reworded. It says the manufacturer shall identify and document known and foreseeable hazards associated with the medical device based upon intended use, reasonably foreseeable misuse, and the characteristics related to safety, and underlined here, in both normal and fault conditions. And I bolded here and pointed out this requires the use of multiple risk analysis tools, as many are only fault condition. It's like FMEA only covers single fault and not known and foreseeable hazards. So FMEA, while it's a good tool, doesn't meet the requirements of the standard by itself. Okay, so you have to use multiple tools. You can also use hazards identified in standards, and we mentioned that in Annex E of the system. Now, I got a graphic here which shows where in your design control process each of these items would appear. So within design input, for instance, you're going to get design inputs from intended use, from clinical trials, from any fault tree analysis you might do upon the harms and hazards, any safety related characteristics, those 30-some questions, from a preliminary hazard analysis. Wonderful tool to use when you don't have the product requirements identified yet. And then usability engineering, in other words, human factors. That's when you do your formative analysis, that's going to be an input into design input. All these are design inputs. Notice FMEA is not included here. FMEA is done typically based upon the design. So it's done at design output. Okay, so you've got design failure modes and effects analysis, and you also got software and biocompatibility risk analysis is going to appear here. You can do biocompatibility after the materials are identified, but not before. And then you've got some additional items down at the bottom there. I'm going to remove something here a minute from I got to go back here. Tom, can you restart me?
Yep, I can. And I just wanted to give a quick update. Let me see here. We're going to extend about
Thank
5
you.
minutes. We have another presentation after that around 10:50. So I just want to give you a heads up. We've got about 10 minutes and we're going to answer a few questions here. So I wanted to let you hit on your last couple things here.
Yep. Well, this one shows where the various types of tools are used. So that's one thing there. Clause 7.4, that's where you find benefit to risk analysis. And there's 3 pages in the technical report that cover this to help you understand. Notice it does not include economic or business advantages. It talks about clinical benefits. Then clause 8 is evaluation of overall residual risk, and it requires the overall or evaluation of overall residual risk after all risk controls are implemented and verified. And it requires the manufacturer to disclose, notice this word, significant residual risk. That's what you have to decide as a manufacturer, what's significant. You have to disclose that significant residual risk in the information in the accompanying documents that go along with your product. And then there's rationale in Annex A.2.8 of 14971 and guidance in 24971, Clause 8 and Annex D. So there's a whole lot of information to help you on this. Clause 9, retitled a risk management review. You now have to identify in your risk management plan who is going to do the review, when it's going to be done, and then it's got to answer the 3 questions, and then you issue a report based upon the results of that review. Okay, Clause 10, we talked about that as being production and post-production activities. It aligns with Clause 8 and 13485. Both of those were aligned with the post-market surveillance requirements by the FDA and the EU. And they were developed from the CAPA guidance from the GHTF, another excellent guidance that has a ton of information in it. And it requires an active process for gaining information. You can't just wait for complaints to come in anymore. You have to actively understand how your product is performing in the field. So you've got to go out and do some work. This was a half a page of requirements in the 2007 standard. It's now a page and a half. And there's 4 pages of guidance in 24971, as opposed to 1 page in the previous version of the TR. Okay. Now, we added the new Annex F for cybersecurity. I talked about that. I talked about Annex G, components and devices designed without meeting 14971 originally. Then Annex H for IVDs, TR 24971 2020. All of that information is guidance and not requirements, as well as Annex A, B, and C in 24971. Those are guidance and not requirements. Annex A is the rationale. Everybody that is doing risk management needs to read that and see where the information is on why that requirement is in place so they can understand what they're supposed to be doing there. Okay, so now let's talk about the release. In December, 14971 was released in both ISO and the EN versions. Those were both out there. They're identical. Okay. At the time of release, the 2012 edition in Europe was withdrawn by SEN with the release of a 2019 edition. As I mentioned earlier, BSI says this 2019 version is state of the art, and each notified body, though, unfortunately, has done its own thing regarding 2012. And by the way, 2012 only applies to the directives. It does not apply to the medical device regulation and the IVD regulation. And I'll talk about that in a minute. 24971 2020 may be released in midsummer due to communication errors at ISO and SEN delaying this document. There's a vote that closes on June 15th. So we could see this document as early as the 16th. If you don't want to wait, you can go to AAMI, their store. They have a draft copy of 24971, and it is going to be virtually identical to what is released. And if you buy that, they will give you the final when it is released. So let's look at the EN. The way standards are released in Europe is there's parallel votes that take place between SEN, CENELEC, ISO, and IEC. All those occur at the same time. There's what's called the Vienna Agreement. And the Vienna Agreement says that when you have a standard that's going to be released by EN and ISO, it has to be released based upon the votes of all the organizations together and released at the same time. So the EN ISO 14971 2019 was initially approved in the votes, but it had no Z annexes because the EC had not issued a standardization request at that time. However, on May 15th, they did issue a standardization request for the MDR and the IVDR, and that includes both 13485 and 14971. Until those standards are updated by SEN and CENELEC, and the results are published in the official journal, they are still not harmonized. The present harmonized standards are not harmonized for MDR and IVDR. They are only harmonized for the directives, so they don't meet the requirements of the MDR and IVDR. So it's up to you as a manufacturer working with your notified body to determine compliance to the MDR and IVDR. With the completion of the standardization request, SEN and CENELEC will issue an amendment to 14971, which will be published as a 2020 edition, hopefully, and it'll be released with Z annexes, but they will have no content deviations. They will only have the tables that compare the standard with the regulation. Final thoughts. Detectability does not appear in 14971. The term used in process FMEA, it's not risk analysis. So that term has no place in 14971. It could possibly modify your manufacturing process to establish inspection and test points in the process, which might reduce the probability of occurrence of harm. So that's where you could make changes to probability based upon detection of the problem in your process. Hazard analysis is not a term or an activity in 14971. We're analyzing the risk and not the hazard. However, that name still appears in external tools such as PHA, and it appears in software risk analysis, hazard analysis as well. Risk traceability is a requirement. I talked about that. FMEA is a good tool, but it has limitations. First one, it only addresses single fault conditions, not all fault conditions. It only addresses fault conditions and not normal condition hazards. That's typically done with usability engineering. FMEA has a requirement for design information for design output, so it's not a design input tool. And 13485 clause 7.7.3 or 7.3.3, excuse me, has a requirement that the outputs of risk management be a design input. So you can't wait till design output to create the design inputs. You have to do that much earlier in the process. The use of product and process safety standards, I mentioned that. Great tool to help you understand. Having your clinicians help you create a harm severity table for risk analysis is very useful. Engineers are not real good at creating harm severity, but clinicians are. And then probably your most work is going to have to be done is in production and post-production. So, Tom, I'm ready to see what kind of...
Yeah, you know what, Ed? So there was so much information there. I felt like we should just keep going. A lot of the questions were answered on some of the slides asking about when is the guidance going to be released and what's a transition period. So we got that there. We are going to provide a list of these questions to you, Ed. Some of them are specific that you could follow up with. For the rest of the audience, we do have handouts of these slides available to you, and you'll get a recording emailed to you. There is also going to be the recordings on our website. So I know, Ed, that was very helpful and informative. We appreciate it. I think there's another presentation here coming up in a few minutes, so we will we'll answer the questions offline.
Yes, and that offline can be at my email address, which is on this last slide as well.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, Ed. We really appreciate it. That was helpful, and I hope you and everyone else has a great day.
You as well.
Thank you.